I'm going to start out with Essential MCs of this decade, the 2010s. I'm going to read straight from my book because I wrote a quick list of the Invisible Renaissance right? And this is my bookmark that my daughter made me. This excellent drawing, right? And Essential MCs, I started with Sean Price because to me, Sean Price is the legend of this decade, and he is the guiding force for everything that happens. Visually, the intensity of MCing, bringing back a ruthlessness to what New York City will accept as what MCing is, you know? He brought that back where, like, if you weren't really MCing, you were thrown off the stage. You weren't allowed in the cypher. And when he advocated for you, it was a big deal, you know what I mean? And Remembered Imperfection of Sean Price, and absolutely one of the greatest MCs that you'll ever hear. And it is in this decade that, in the very beginning of it, that he solidified himself as a legend. Because I think he was making himself a legend from having excellent work with Helter Skelter, but then giving his best works in that most difficult transition of from 2005 until his passing, when he returned to the Essence in 2015. That 10-year run is one of the best I've ever heard. You know? Those three Sean Price albums are, you know, they're necessary in any collection. Your collection is trash, straight trash, if you don't have that in there. You know what I mean? And if you live in Brooklyn and you don't have Sean Price's albums, I mean, I don't know what to say to you. You know, you like something else. But we also have to go into Ka. I think Ka's the only MC that probably exists today where I would say personally that every album he has is a classic album. There's a lot of, didn't say he's the greatest MC that I've ever heard, because there are other MCs that could easily challenge in those GOAT conversations. But because he never overloads, he never floods. He doesn't have albums that are just okay, like let's say legends like Rakim or KRS One have. He has no flaw in his solo catalog, you know, once this decade begins. And we could talk about the first album. I think it's called The Iron. No, what's it called? I'm remembering the cover. It's an incredible cover. But you know what? Let me amend that, because I don't think that his very first album, which I'm forgetting, I erroneously start from his second album, and that's not his first album. Ka's first album is actually, if I remember correctly, is Ironworks. And that shows really the potential of Ka. And it's a incredible album cover because he's actually writing using a bullet as a pencil. It's just dope. Just dope. But he continued to have great album covers throughout the decade. But even still, even if he's just like, well, then I can't find an MC that only has classic works, in my opinion. But I think that once he started in 2012 with Grief Pedigree, every EP, every album that comes from Grief Pedigree onward, to me, is necessary and absolutely needs to be part of your collection. He's that good. You know what I mean? He's that good. So I'm going to talk about him as we go along, because when I review the years particularly, we're going to go into all these works. Then we have the absolute stylist of the era, the leader of style, cool, and tempo delivery, cadence, and as a producer, soul clip sound, taking that to the next level, and that's Rock Marciano. You know, Marcialago ends this decade, and what a way to end it. From 2010 all the way to 2019, releasing incredible works. I started the show off playing that first great classic song that he set it off with, Snow. You know, such an incredible song that Sean Price demanded that they remix it so that way Sean Price could get on that beat. officially, and that's a great song. The Snow remix with Rock and Sean. What can I say about Rock Marciano? But talk about it as we get into the years, particularly. Then we have who I think flooded. So I think he's the greatest flooder. MC Flood. I don't know. I gotta come out with a name for this one, but the best MC that floods you with work, with a barrage that's abnormal, where I have always assumed would dilute your work, and instead it just comes out in an elite level every time. And that's Napoleon the Legend. The last 2 years, he probably has released about 200 to in the range of 200 to 300 from 2018 through 2019, and it's all incredible. And I think that there's such a diversity of depth, ideal, picture perfect flow. Actually make songs. There's always a concept, even on like a basic battle bars. There's always some type of concept, that he's throwing in, or non sequiturs that go with the battle bars that leave some type of insight. I mean, he's just an exceptional MC, and he ended this, 2019, all of his works were noteworthy, and the most noteworthy was the near classic Bronze Saints, which he produced as well. So, just incredible stuff. Then we have Spit Gemz. I don't think any list of great albums, great MCs is correct without Spit Gemz. Spit Gemz embodies the intensity of being a hardcore MC and being a writer, lyricist, poet, thinker, philosopher, hard times visualist. It's all there. It's all there. He does everything on the mic. You know what I mean? He does every single thing you could think of on the mic, and it's never not rugged. And I'll reveal some of my favorite albums because it's still an argument. Probably only Max L. Ranker, my brother Max Lowe probably could rank the albums, but I still don't know which is what I would consider his best work. He probably doesn't have a best work yet. I still think he's in his prime, and the year that he took off from full albums, it's only a waiting game for him to continue that prime. So it's just impeccable, and we'll be talking about him more, of course. Starvin B. I think Starvin B is the epitome of the livest MC's MC. Watching him live so many times, I've watched him with a cold, with no voice, and still rock a crowd. I've seen him rock crowds, small crowds, ciphers. The guy could do anything, and he has one of the most energetic flows you have, and he's underrated when it comes to valuing the depth of his insight. Not only is Starvin B a learned individual, he also is a brother that you can talk about philosophical things with. The fact that he doesn't over-intellectualize philosophical concepts, whether on wax or in person, to me, that's what gives him depth to me as a thinker. Whereas with most superficial people, it would take away. And that's where people go incorrect with things. I would have to add Rapsody. Rapsody's work was incredible. There are albums that were my favorite, but if we think about great MCs that are peeking into the mainstream, I think Rapsody, to me, is my favorite. She's my favorite. Most people in the mainstream, they're going Kendrick Lamar or J. Cole. I'll give you my controversial thought. I think that the works of Lamar and J. Cole, they ought to be in a collector's collection, like a quality collection, like if you have a good, vast collection. But I don't put them anywhere, none of their works as far as Essential. And I don't consider any of their albums classic, I don't see it at all. But maybe 10 years later, I might look back and see it. My favorite MC out of the country, Cyrus Malachi. My brother Cyrus Malachi from the UK. He almost technically, for me, he did, but not for everyone else. He ended this decade with an incredible work, but he didn't release it officially. It's actually called The Blind Watchmaker. And boy, that was powerhouse. I've been banging that album for months, you know? It feels good when you got an exclusive that nobody got, you know what I mean? But I've been banging that joint for like months, and then he didn't really release it, so yet, hopefully it'll be anytime soon, but it's an incredible album. But Cyrus Malachi dominated the entire decade, one of the great lyricists. Everybody that he is influenced by, I'm not even going to name, you can figure it out. He honors, he's a writer, his word choices are exceptional. His baritone is deep, his clarity is powerful, and he booms through a track. So imagine like I don't even want to say it though, but like imagine like a hardcore jizza, an even rougher jizza, with Chuck D power in a slow flow, it's just dope. And as we go along through the decade, we'll see the works. So quickly to go through, Sleep Sinatra, my brother out in Nebraska. I call him a masterful, introspective, and verbal dexteritist. I don't know if that's the word. I made that up. And I call him the MC, the meditation choreographer of the Invisible Renaissance. No one has a smoother voice, tone, and flow than Sleep Sinatra, And his works, as you'll see throughout the decade, what a prime. Frank Knight, my brother Frank Knight, I had him on the show. I think, real simple, Frank Knight is on his rise with the level of works that he's making, the albums. I think they will soon be classic. Not just yet, but he is absolutely the greatest performer I saw in the 2010s. And I think that he ranks up there with the Busta Rhymes, the KRS-Ones, the Black Thoughts. In his own way, he's in that range, though. I don't think anyone acts out and performs as if he's a theater who's a thespian of his own verses on stage as Frank Knight. Just nuts, just nuts. And let me go through the others. Zagnif Nori, I think he's one of the greatest writing lyricists, and his flow only gets better and better, Shaz Illyork. Shaz Illyork to me has a vibe just like Method Man had in 1994, 1993. When we looked at what the epitome of New York City, the vibe was, Shaz Illyork was capturing that in the beginning of this decade and throughout. He just didn't bring as many works as so many others sees, but he's still at the top of his game. Just like you listen to the Science Project album that he has out on his Bandcamp. Just go into Bandcamp, look up Shaz Illyork, right? S-H-A-Z, Ill, and then York, right? And some others, though. One of the great duos of this decade, Epidemic, with Hex One and Tek-nition. I'm a big fan of Hex One. Both of these brothers have incredible flow. Their albums are ideal boom bap. And, they're just addictive listens. I talked about him when I reviewed Rock Marciano's Marcialago recently. I'm a big fan of Willie the Kid. I think he's criminally underrated. And I talked about him a lot. I think he's one of the greatest stylistic lyricists that we see. And he is a precursor. And he's part of it. But he's one of the, I don't want to say pioneers, but he's an early precursor to this crime rhyme wave of lyricist MCs. The crime rhyme lyricist MC, he's one of the first ones. Then you have Skanks, another incredible performer. And really, if you wanted to say what is hip hop, I'll give you Skanks. Skanks is in the dictionary somewhere in these example definitions of what hip hop is. As a show host for his Hip Hop Brainiac show, the Bank High Hour radio show, all of these. His works in the decade with Epidemic and then also with Kaitachi. His stuff with the Click Bank High fan, which is one of the ideal New York Brooklyn families. and why he was my choice. That I would have had him on Family and Loyalty for Gangstar, not J. Cole, who did well on it, but didn't really speak on Family and Loyalty. And I definitely would have had Skanks. And Skanks, you got to have some albums of his in your collection, or else it's weak. Then we have one of my favorite MCs, Marquee. I thought she never got to debut and has one of the great albums of this decade. Freddie Gibbs, you know what I mean? He worked himself beyond being a poor man's G-rap, and his work with Madlib is essential. The 2 albums he has with Madlib are enough. A lot of other great works this decade, but the 2 albums with Madlib are enough to make him one of the great MCs of this decade, the essentials. I put Sa-Roc, another great female MC. I don't think that musically she's been able to find the realm of next level song making that Rapsody has, but she's there. My brother Chilo, go back to my early episodes to see why Chilo was one of my favorite stylists, lyricists out there. As far as prolific, I gotta mention the God Fahim, Mach-Hommy. They're dope MCs who've elevated themselves greater because they kept that dopeness, which is not the highest elite level, but they kept that high level for an abnormal amount of records. A pure writer of the dark humor, I gotta put FU on that list. Awon, one of the great revivalist MCs of the decade. And then we can't end it, even though he did too many songs with Fake Ghost. Meyhem Lauren, you know, one of the best. And of course, I'm not mentioning MCs like Elzai, Planet Asia, Rex, Sky Zoo, because except for Sean Price, who was so instrumental in this, I'm mentioning people that had a solo career only in that decade, like Rock was before, but he had his solo career kicks off this decade. So that's why I didn't mention certain people, you know, but they're mentioned in my book and whatnot.